of stuff. So, sorry, Ian, I didn't mean to do 2 sermons, but Ian said, I said to Ian, you better wrap it up. He said, no, me. So I'll just, okay.
Hey, so this morning we're on to Mark chapter 2, and if you've been following, you'll know there's actually 5 stories of interactions in Mark chapter 2, and it goes through to about 3:6. And these are interactions with the authorities, with the Pharisees, and the antagonism starts, it's sort of brewing, and it builds and it builds and it builds. And by the 5th story, they're like, right, we need to kill this guy, we need to take him out. And so, why is that? What's going on here? And I guess this is another story where I've never really seen it like this, but there's where Jesus, he talks about the wine, the new wine and the old wine, and what he's saying in it all is like there's no compromise, there's no middle ground. It's either me or it's back to law, and it's actually what Greg was saying about it. So like it comes down to him. That's what, and this is why why the animosity and antagonism slowly built up, and it's a really cool little passage of scripture, and so I just wanted to speak into that this morning, and so it's Mark 2:18 to 23, so it's only 5 verses. And so in it, Jesus compares himself to new wine. If you don't know, new wine ferments and it expands, so it needs a new wineskin. The old won't work. So now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and some people came and asked Jesus, how is it that John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees are fasting, but yours aren't? And Jesus answered, how can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth onto an old garment. Otherwise the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins are ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins. So there's this confrontation here, and it's like, so what's this all about? And so notice it's not the Pharisees asking at this point, it's some people, the people in the crowds they're looking to John's disciples and going, man, these guys fast. And they're looking to the Pharisees, and they see the Pharisees and they see them fasting. And then they're looking to Jesus' disciples and going, what's going on? These guys seem to be just having a good time. They're not fasting, and what's going on here? And we don't, is it just a petty question? Like we don't, in that culture, we don't kind of, when we look back, we kind of think, man, are these guys just, like, we don't really get it. We don't really understand what's going on. And the 3 core tenets of the Pharisees was prayer, almsgiving, and fasting. They were the 3 kind of key outward manifestations of their faith. Was those 3 areas that they were really passionate about. And we don't know a huge amount about a lot of the other groups that were around at the time, but we do actually know a lot about the Pharisees. And they appeared around 168 AD. And so you think 168 years before Christ, in the time of what was called the Maccabean revolt. And that all ignited when the authorities, who were the Seleucids, they were the rulers at the time, they rededicated the temple, like the second temple, to Zeus. And they said, stuff it, we're going to shut down the worship and the practices of the Jewish people, and we're going to bring in Greek and Hellenism ideas, and we're going to start worshipping Zeus in the temple. And so the Pharisees sort of came into being at that time, and they were like, no way, this is not okay. And they sort of rose up. They reckon they only constituted about 1% of the population in Jesus' time. So it was about 6,000 odd people, that sort of thing. So they're a very small group, but super passionate, very influential on the crowds. Hence, the crowds are comparing Jesus' disciples to these Pharisees. And we often give them a hard time. We often think, man, they seem, it's real negative in the Bible. But actually, these guys were passionate about God. It's interesting that out of all the other groups, there was the Sadducees, if you remember those, the Essenes, the Herodians, and the Zealots. Do you know all of those groups got completely wiped out? They didn't survive the fall of Jerusalem in 67 to 70 AD, but the Pharisees did. They continued on. Actually, the whole history of the Jewish scribes and their thinking and ways and the parchments and that has all come through the Pharisaic tradition. They kept all of that because of the passion that they had. They were willing to die for it. And you see, if you imagine that, they only had the Old Testament, right? And so they saw through the Old Testament how people's hearts wavered and how, as a nation, their hearts often, that drifted from God. And so this question about fasting came up. And so just to give you I guess an example it's a really good example of their passion, is that their heart was they wanted to be right with God. Okay? So to be right with God meant to be morally upstanding. So it meant your faith had to be walked out. It had to mean something. It meant what you said and what you did was really important. Right? And so they were like, well, we've got to be of right standing with God. So how do you do that? Well, you live morally right. So how do we do that? So they searched the scriptures. And so fasting was one of the areas. And they're like, well, there's only one fast day of fasting in the whole year that's required in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And that was on the Day of Atonement. So it was a full 24 hours that you had to fast. But actually, when you read through, you read the Kings and things like that, you find out that, fasts were declared for national tragedies. Where like this first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. And so they had a fast for that, a memorial to remind them of that day. They fasted when there was plagues and when there was droughts, when there was impending war. The leaders asked for a fast. The individuals fasted for, crises in their life. You think of David, when he had the affair with Bathsheba and it was pronounced that the baby would be lost. He fasted and mourned for days that God, would you change your mind? So they saw that, hey, man, there's this pattern of fasting and we want to live right. So what they said was, well, you know what? We're going to fast Mondays and Thursdays. Every year, every day, every week of the year, our whole lives. We want to be morally right with God. So we'll fast. That's the parameters. And so it's like, here was the law, and they're like, we don't want to cross the law. We have such passion for God that we're gonna create a whole lot of parameters around that, so to widen it, if you like, so that we'll not step on and encroach that one day. And we'll go the extra mile, God, because we're so passionate. And so they created literally hundreds of laws about, about being right, about moral living. It was everything. And you see, and this is what's happening, is that Jesus is coming along and his disciples are like having a good time. They're not fasting. You're not very holy. You're starting a new movement, and your disciples are not as holy as the Pharisees. If you want to be serious about your faith, you need to think about fasting, Jesus. You need to take a good hard look at what your disciples are doing. Because John's disciples are fasting, and the Pharisees, my goodness, look at what they're doing. They are amazing. They are holding the line and then some. What are your disciples doing? That's quite a question. That's quite a challenge, isn't it? And you think, what's he going to say? And so, it's really interesting. It's like they must have, they must have been wondering, like, what's his response going to be? It's almost like I heard a story. It was about a guy who had a building crew on his on his property, and he really wanted to help out. He's got his bandsaw, and he just really wants to help these guys out. And then finally, in exasperation, like, look, here's some lengths of wood. We need 200 of them cut to 6 meters. Go for it. And so he measures the first one to 6 meters, cuts it, throws away that one, uses that as the next guide, cuts that, and keeps going. And of course, if you know, like a saw blade's a couple of mil thick, right? So you start off with a length of 6 meters, but as you measure and you recut, it slowly gets 2 mils shorter each time. And so by the 100th plank, it's now 5.8 meters, because it's not like the original. And that's kind of like what the Pharisees have done here. They've taken the original intention and the heart of it, and they're like, man, we've got to cut, we've got to replicate this, we've got to protect ourselves, and they created a barrier, if you will, and it's something that actually looked nothing like the original. And this is what Jesus is. This is this challenge to him. Fasting looked pious, it looked holy, it reminded them of the sinfulness of their heart, and like God was so sorry for that. They saw these guys fasting from sun up to sundown, Mondays and Thursdays. And this is Jesus' reply. He says, how can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But a time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast. Man, I bet they were scratching their heads at that one, eh? They would have thought, what? Like, what is that? That's some reply, And what is he saying here? See, a wedding feast was one of the great celebrations in their culture. Like, it lasted 7 days, man. Like, of feasting, of celebrating, of dancing, it was like one heck of a celebration. So the implication is that I'm the bridegroom. I'm here. So Jesus flips this question about fasting, and it becomes a question about identity. See, he's saying that the good news is so good that it's going to radically change your life, that the kingdom of God has come close. That's how Mark introduced Jesus introduced his ministry, was like the kingdom of God has come close. This is the most incredible news that's going to change your life. Like, Jesus is the game changer. He knows it. And he doesn't back down. There's no wavering. There's no compromise. He did not use de-escalation techniques. You hear all about that. He didn't say, oh, guys, I'm really sorry I've made you feel a bit confused. It's okay. These feelings that you have inside, it's all right. We're on a journey. And you're going to come to a place where you understand, and it's going to be great. He didn't minimize the conflict. Actually, he didn't ignore the question. He did the complete opposite. And he highlights the magnitude of this situation, you see, because the wedding feast is for 7 full days. So, and in that culture, the Pharisees, culturally and religiously, they were allowed to celebrate. They were expected to engage in that celebration of the wedding feast. It was okay for them to do that. So, of course, the question then is why aren't you celebrating? Why aren't you celebrating me? Are you going to join in? Like, I remembered the time of Becky and Jesse's wedding, and I remember the venue there and the hall down in West Eden, and I was sitting at the back. I was sitting on one of the tables there, and we're waiting around, and then just this wall of smell hit me. I looked behind, and the caterers were bringing out these roast pork with the pineapples on it, and lamb on the bone, and beef, and it was like, oh man, it's just smelling so good, And we're like, come on, Jesse, hurry up. We want to get into the feeding, we want to get into the celebration. And this picture is the wedding guests impatiently waiting. They want to celebrate. And it's like, so for goodness sake, why are you fasting? Like, you're an idiot. You don't fast on a wedding. It's like, join in. I didn't sit down at Jesse's and smell all that and go, oh, no, I'm fasting. It's like, no way, you don't fast in a celebration. And it's so Jesus is like pushing back, and he's going, they're not fasting because the good news is here. He's walking among them. Like, bang, he's not saying there's no compromise. He's not going to say, hey man, I really love what you're doing. It's awesome. It doesn't say anything like that. He just hits the nail on the head. This is who I am. The kingdom's come close. Are you going to celebrate? C.S. Lewis, I was thinking about this, he's so un-PC as Jesus, and I think of the C.S. Lewis, he wrote the Narnia series, but he was a real Christian thinker and probably one of the greatest in the 20th century. And he wrote down, he just said that like Jesus he only really gave people three options. And the people who he walked with only had three options. Either he was a total nutter, like he was a madman. He said, I'm God. That's what numerous times, and he was like, I am Jesus, I am God walking among you. Or he is something worse. He is a person who fully knows he's not God, and he's imitating and pretending that he's God, and therefore evil incarnate, and trying to twist and coerce and manipulate a whole generation of people. Or he is God. He's not a good person. He's not a nice guy. He's not a great teacher. They saw that. That is not an option with Jesus. Like, you have to decide one of those three. And this is what they are faced with when they're listening to him. And it's interesting, and notice that Jesus too, in that second part, his issue is not about fasting at all. And actually he's saying, man, when I'm not here, they are going to fast. They are going to be pressing in. They are going to be, fasting is sort of it's not an arm twisting of God type of thing, but it's kind of saying, God, I'm actually the physical does not satisfy anymore. Like, I need more of you. And to deny oneself that, food is the most sort of basic kind of, it's a great pleasure, isn't it? People travel around the world just to try different foods. And it's like, man, I need more, and it's a denial of the physical that would please and satisfy. And so Jesus is saying, yeah, there's going to be a time where people who follow me, my believers, will fast, but it's not now. And so it's this subtle hint too that even right now, early in his ministry, that the shadow of the passion and the crucifixion is right there. Like, Jesus knows what's ahead of him. He knows that the ultimate expression of the kingdom is his death. And so he's coming at the law from a totally opposite side. The Pharisees are going, God, we love you, and we want to obey this law, this moral code that you've given us, because we want to have right standing with you. We want to be righteous in your eyes. So we're gonna expand it. We're going to add a whole lot of more rings to it so that we don't touch the core. We know if we cross it out here, we know at least we haven't crossed the core part of it. And Jesus goes, you know what? That's exhausting. That will never make you right before God. And there's another way. I'm going to fulfill the law. I'm going to live a perfect life and die for you, and remove the penalty, remove the stain of the law, remove the consequences of the law. And that's the new wine. And it is not compatible with the old. You cannot put new wine in old wineskins. You cannot put a new patch on old clothing. It's like there is a breaking and a demarcation and a dividing line, and his name's Jesus. And he's like, this is it. There's no other option. There's no compromise. There's no kind of assimilation and merging of these two ideas. It's me. And so that's why the Pharisees just couldn't get their heads around it. And that's why they ended up saying, we've got to kill this guy. Because the heart of the religious spirit is, I've got to be right. I've got to do it right. And if you're in the way of me doing it right, then you're in trouble. If my eternity is being blocked by you, then I'm going to declare war on you. That's why the Pharisees were like, man, if I touch something unclean, I'm defiled. Jesus goes, you know what? If I touch you, you get contaminated. That's why he hung out with the lepers. That's why he hung out with the tax collectors. That's why he hung out with the poor and every unclean person that the Pharisees thought that they were, from their heart and passion of wanting to serve God, they thought that they were doing the right thing. And it's like, but yet they got it so wrong, you know? Excuse me. But we do the same thing. We so easily drop into method, don't we? You know, we think, oh, I'll just go to church on Sunday and I'll do this and I'll do that. And it's like, and my faith feels secure. Don't we? That's what the Pharisees wanted. They wanted security. They wanted to know that their faith that was good enough to please God. And Jesus is saying to them, man, you need to approach from a completely different angle. And the angle is that you can do nothing that pleases me. You cannot, from a point of view of making you righteous, for declaring you righteous, you cannot, you're never going to be good enough. And he's like, but I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to step into that fold. I'm going to take on all your rubbish and I'm going to die on your behalf. And this is the sacrifice that he was prepared to do. You know, nothing good in this world exists without sacrifice, does it? You know, you talk to any athlete, you know, they know they've got to sacrifice in order to gain. You've got to save in order to get debt free. You've got to give up something, you know. And so, this shadow of the cross is the pattern that the way up is the way down. You know, that we to gain ourselves, we've got to lose ourselves. You know, and it's so hard, but Jesus modeled it, and that's what he wants. That's his promise, is that actually when you do that, you'll gain eternity, you'll gain relationship with me. Your life will be significant as you lay it down. So there's this real sense of finality in these images. It says in verse 21, so no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on the old garment. Otherwise, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. So he's saying you cannot marry Christianity into Judaism. Doesn't fit. You'll wreck both. Actually, if I'll wreck this, and he's saying, no, I'm the answer. I'm fulfilling the law, but you can't live a life where you're trying to live under the law and live in relationship with me. It doesn't work. So no one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the skins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins. Such everyday images, you know, they would have gone, oh my goodness, I get it. You know, just sewing a patch on a new piece of cloth, and I guess, you know, as it dries, it just pulls. And so, of course, there's no give in the old wineskin, so it literally just tears. So you lose the new wine and the skin. Both are ruined. So it's a sense of finality in the images that there's no merging of the two. But in it all, like that, Jesus honors the Torah. You know, the actual miracle beforehand, you know, when he healed the leper, he said, go to the priest, offer the sacrifice that Moses, you know, requires of you and so the priest would declare, you'll be declared healed. And yet you'll see in the next one on the Sabbath, he he seemingly breaks the rules, the Sabbath rules that the Pharisees had made. But and so where that would restrict Jesus, he breaks those patterns. So it was only Jesus who could come in from this different angle. He was the only one who was righteous, who could live the perfect life, and who could fulfill the law, and who could die on our behalf, and who could pay the penalty of that we would do ourselves. And it's this sense of the divine exchange that's happening, and that Jesus is looking towards in the cross. And 2 Corinthians 5:21 just kind of says it all. And it's God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And Greg has a great way of sort of unpacking this. We do this with the students at YWAM, and we would say, so did Jesus have to sin for him to take on our sin? So, of course, the answer is no, right? He received it. He received it. So do we have to be righteous to take on his righteousness? No. We just receive it. We receive it. So if God was to speak to you, what do you think he would say that when he sees you, he sees the righteousness of Jesus? What would he say to you? That when he looks at you, he sees the perfect Son. He sees the character, he sees the love, he sees the devotion, he sees the purity, and he sees the holiness of Jesus on the cross when he sees you. What would he say to you? Amen. That's the new wine. That is the new wine. He wants to pour it into you. New words over your life, new hope, new joy. See, it's relationship with him. You're incredible. You're worthy. I love you. You're safe in my hands. Don't worry about COVID. You know. It's the new wine. Trying to please God to earn his love and favor is exhausting. The Pharisees tried it. You know? They hung Jesus on the cross for it. They thought they were doing the right thing. They thought that God would have been so pleased with them. They missed it completely. I believe it's like God just wants the straitjackets this morning. He wants to pull the straitjackets off. He wants you to actually have a fresh encounter with him. You know, to know what he says about you. Not about, just generic stuff, but what does he say about you? What does he want to encourage you about? What does he want you to step into? What straitjacket, what pattern of your mind does he that is causing restriction over you, that's holding you back? What does he want to speak into this morning? What new wine does he want to pour into that wineskin? Is your wineskin stretchy? Actually, do you need to just ask for a new wineskin? God, I'm done. I'm done trying. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I give up. I need to hear you afresh again. And it's out of that relationship, and it's out of that love, it's out of that knowledge that we are utterly secure in him, and that knowledge that there's nothing that you can do to make him love you anymore, that in that place that you want to serve him. That in that place that you can step out. In that place that you can fight the fights. And it comes out of that relationship. It comes out of that new wine. And it's not a doing, but it's a being. And I guess, that's what as the team come up this morning, I feel like that's the heart of the message, is that, man, that we don't have to strive, we don't have to earn God's, his love, his favor. Actually, that we stand here, that he sees Jesus' righteousness on you. We are declared holy. And he's saying, and so be who you are. That's the command. And so, so if this morning, if there's the words that came out, if you just want to respond to that, and you're just tired, and you'd love just that new wine this morning, then fresh encounter with God, then please do come up. We'd love to pray for you. We've got 11 o'clock the next service starts, so there's no morning tea, tea and coffee, but feel free to stick around and chat and pray. That'd be awesome. Bless you.